So, okay, so let me start. Good. Okay, thanks. So let's start with our polling question here. So the first poll is, hold on, because I added some here. So the first polling question is, what has been the client or prospect interest in Teams in the last 12 months as a collaboration tool, i.e. versus Zoom? Okay, please vote.
Steve, that's kind of a loaded question because I've got clients that use both Zoom and Teams.
No,
so
that's
it's not an either or.
That's, oh, okay. Well, yeah, that is a loaded question then. Yeah, I think it's interest in Teams in general.
So I'm reading that to be collaboration is the key word there.
Yeah, it's really, you know, Teams versus Zoom as a collab tool, not as a UC tool. Okay. And let me just, yep, let me close this out. So thanks everyone. And Kevin, of course, I can share these slides with you, these results later on.
Yep.
Okay. So here are the results. So the winner is 61 to 80%, followed by 21 to 40, followed by an even tie between plus 80% and 41 to 60, and followed by 0 to 20. So it's kind of all over the board, which I find very interesting. But obviously, if you look at the two bottom two, or even the three bottom, the majority, obviously, people are interested in Teams, period. So let me give you another one. This is now a little different, but the same thing. What has been the client or prospect interest in Teams as a UC telephony replacement? Oh, sorry about the spelling error there. Replacement tool in the last 12 months. So this is actually to replace the current infrastructure with Microsoft Teams. Hey, Chuck, we have to lock the rest of these people out, okay? It's getting too full at this point, the attendees here. I'm just kidding.
We're going to lock them in.
They can never stop. Yes.
Okay, thanks everyone. Let me end the poll here. Let me just again take a quick snapshot. And the results are a little different, and obviously because it's an entire replacement tool, but 0 to 20 wins, followed by 21 to 40, followed by 41 to 60, and almost a regressive kind of interest result here. So that's what I'm seeing too, but we actually have interest from some clients in the multiple thousand endpoint areas looking for the Teams. Who is that person? I can't see. Okay, so thanks everyone. Let me go on here. So, oh, I didn't update this slide. I apologize. That was Twilio last week, and he did a fabulous job. So I apologize for that. And it was just a great session. And from Glenn, I think it was Weinberg, and he just did a fabulous job. And anyone who has not, who didn't attend last week, who hasn't seen, it's worth definitely a watch. Okay, and if you ping Marsha Bailey, she will get you a copy of this 51-page report all about the customer engagement aspect. Okay, different than customer experience. Great report. Okay, so some famous facts. I've changed a little bit from famous quotes, so we'll see if you know this one. What was the first phone greeting? Anybody know? It was not hello, I could tell you that.
Was it ahoy?
Ahoy.
Yeah, it was actually ahoy hoy. Originated by Alexander Graham Bell. Okay, so then the second question is, or comment is, who recommended hello, which eventually stuck as the norm? Anybody?
His assistant.
Kitty.
No, it was actually Thomas Edison.
Huh.
And legend has it that Alexander Graham Bell answered calls with ahoy hoy until the day he died. He really wanted it to stick, but it didn't quite. So just an interesting bit of information there. Okay, so again, we've got Kevin Keeler on this week. And again, Kevin, thanks for offering your expertise here. We'll have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah.
We have an infomercial from Balto. Is Balto ready?
I am.
All right, Lindsay, thanks. Here we go, Lindsay.
Awesome. Start the clock. I'll be quick.
No.
Perfect.
You're good.
So just a quick reminder and a quick what Balto is presenting on next Tuesday. So we will be talking about, we'll have Ben Lazar, our CMO, and then also Pat Kerr, our Director of Solutions Engineering, joining next week. And they'll be discussing revolutionizing the contact center with collaborative AI and real-time technology, how Balto boosts and supports agent success. So they'll dig into how the modern contact centers are using AI and real-time technology to improve customer experience, boost sales, and achieve nearly flawless compliance scores. Ben will also be sharing some research from our internal research team, which is called the Conversation Excellence Lab here at Balto, including a coaching survey of 515 contact center managers in the United States. And he'll also be sharing a bunch of research from a survey of over 1,000 contact center agents, where we identified some of the most common reasons agents make mistakes and how to fix them. So we hope you can join us next week.
Excellent, Lizzie. And I think rumor has it you're going to have an analyst on named Blair Pleasant as well.
I believe so, yes.
And Blair-
Hopefully we'll be able to provide a bunch of really awesome information, specifically around AI, real-time technology, and then also along with a bunch of metrics from some of our internal research team. So
Excellent. We're looking forward to it, Lindsay. Thanks.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Fran, you're up.
Thanks, Steve. Coming to you from Denver, home of the Colorado Avalanche, for all of you hockey fans out there. And wearing their colors today, it's a little wild and crazy, but we are hoping to see them succeed. And as far as happy hour tomorrow night, we have several new members, so feel free to participate. We're going to go back to 3 truths and a lie. So feel free to participate so we can get to know everybody, and hopefully all the new members will join us. So see you tomorrow night. Thanks, Steve.
And I think historically those lies are pretty good, right, Fran? They're kind of
They're really good. Oh yeah, it's hard to tell the difference.
And you're allowed to bring a coffee, a tea, or a real drink with you, right? Correct?
Absolutely. Yep. Depending on what area of the world you're in, whatever's appropriate.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Fran. So
Thanks, Steve.
Denise is actually on vacation this week, so we're going to pinch hit with Chuck Vondra. Chuck?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'll be quick as I want to get to the material here, but I also, to follow up on Fran's message, want to congratulate and welcome new members. I think we had 3 new consultant members join last week and maybe a VAC or 2. So definitely it's exciting to see the team grow. And I also want to welcome non-SCTC members to these fireside chats and remind you that to join the SCTC and get access to tremendous benefits, it costs about the equivalent of a few billable hours a year. So it's almost embarrassingly inexpensive and valuable to get in with the SCTC. So come on board and enjoy the benefits, and welcome to the new members.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, and totally agree. It's amazing how much personally it has benefited me as a practice as well as a professional. The exposure that I've personally gotten over the years has been tremendous. And the fact that I get to partner with others as you do as well, Chuck, and means a lot. And very profitable, by the way. So we're going to be doing taming teams today. And again, this is part 1. Kevin's going to spearhead it up. So Kevin, I'm going to stop my share here so that you can engage there. And I think you'll find this quite interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so Kevin, I got to ask you, before we get started, what's up with your dog? I mean, I see your dog on every single post on LinkedIn.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Like that's the thing. Like people like at Enterprise Connect, people were like, did you bring your dogs? Right. And I'm like, it was hard enough getting out of Canada, doing all the tests and figuring out, it's like, I'm like, I was happy that I got there, right? Because the day before you had to test negative to travel. So no, I didn't bring my dogs, but I don't know. That just, it seems, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, taming teams. I think a lot of what I do, I learned about with like taming my husky. I think that a lot of that applies. So there will be some dog analogies. Be forewarned.
And just to personalize it, what's your husky's name?
My husky's name is Kai.
Kai. Okay, great.
Yes, there's a bit of a story about Kai, so you'll learn more about Kai. So
okay,
so thank you for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to to get to talk to the Sctc. So here we go. As soon as I can make it move. Okay. So I mean, Enterprise Connect in March really was my first in-person event in 2 years, and it was super exciting. And I think, just being near people, not on a digital screen, and seeing how tall or short they are, and and people that I had met during COVID and never in person. So it was fantastic. I think, the word that came to mind, and I think everybody kind of felt this, who was there, was it was euphoric, right? So I started doing just speaking at Enterprise Connect 10 years ago, and I always really tried to have a bit of a theme, right? So I mean, you could put up slides. So I started talking about relationships and living well with Link, and then Skype came out, so I had success with Skype for Business and the teeth of enterprise voice. I think that was the first time that in 2015 where Kai made an appearance. Then I talked about succeeding with Skype and how to win the game. Then I talked about making the right choices and avoiding the monster obstacles, figuring out the road from Skype to business to Teams, transitioning to Teams. Then this is really where, then I had taming teams and working from home effectively, delivering the best Teams user experience. And so then this March was my 10th year presenting. Of course, 2 of those were virtual. And really, what I want to talk about, what I talked about then and what I'm going to talk about today is really leveraging the full power of Teams. And at least in part 1, that really isn't going to be, for a long time, it was all about how to PSTN enable Teams. Now I'm really going to talk, it's really back to your first poll, Steve, talk about more of the collab features around Microsoft Teams. So as I was introduced, I'm Kevin Keeler. I am the co-founder of Enable UC and the lead strategist. We really focus on helping typically larger organizations, as well as vendors, leverage the full power of the Microsoft ecosystem. But I think, as Steve said, a lot of that is focused on Teams. I mean, I used to do Cisco UC and whatever, but I don't know, the industry voted, and now I'm the Teams guy. And for a while I tried to, continue to do other stuff, but then I just kind of leaned into Teams, and that's not a bad place to be, just given the how successful Teams is, right? So I'm also, a proud member of the BC Strategies group, which is this, independent team of experts, and of which, Blair Pleasant is a member, Jim Burton, Steve, Martha Beyer, Roberta Fox, so a whole bunch of people. And in fact, at Enterprise Connect, I think the majority of content was presented by BC Strategies people. And then kind of as a passion project, I started with software development back in the VIC-20 and Commodore 64 days, writing video games. And so really in 2021, decided to create an application for Teams, for the Teams App Store, partly because I wanted to learn about the process. And secondly, because it's something I enjoy doing. And then Trivia Engine, it uses gamification to do knowledge reinforcement in a fun way. So, all of these things, what's in common is really, I love technology, but I love when it helps people. And that could be help people, it could entertain people, educate people, but certainly in a business context, I think, leveraging the full power Teams is about, driving positive business outcomes.
So Kevin, I was a VIC-20 maniac, and I remember the columns being only 22 spaces wide. It was kind of crazy,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was like, we created a game called Jack Attack. We first wrote it for the VIC-20, but then Commodore was coming out with this brand new fancy machine, the Commodore 64, and they said, let's release it as a gold medallion game on the Commodore 64. So yeah, you're 100% right. There was like 22 characters wide, and so then we had double the number of characters, so we had to figure out what to do with that. So that was a very long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
It was a good time, but it's a long time.
It was great.
So the interesting thing is, I told who I was, but then when we could raise our hands, because we were all in the same big boardroom, I asked the audience, and it was interesting because it kind of aligned a little bit with your poll. The vast majority of organizations and the people there, I mean, obviously, if you're coming to a Taming Teams session, you're likely using Teams. So the vast majority of people were using Teams. But I would say, and it's always hard in a big room to figure out how many hands are up, but certainly, less than a quarter. So I don't know, 20%, were using Teams as their PBX. And then, a smaller percentage of people were using both Teams and, Zoom or WebEx. And I imagine it's much more often, I know a lot of organizations that I work with use Teams and also Zoom, sometimes either for whether it's executive calls or external calls. So, but I'm not really going to talk about Teams telephony in this first part, but I gave a keynote last week at Microsoft opened a brand new Toronto office. And so there was Microsoft Poly and Ribbon there. And ahead of it, we did ask, what are some of the common barriers to Teams? So kind of like if you've considered it, what's the problem? Why aren't you moving forward? So this I thought was interesting, and I thought I'd share it with the audience here. So, the vast, a third of the people, the top score was that the people thought it had inadequate features, followed by it's too expensive, existing contracts and leases. I guess, technically difficult. Hopefully they know that they can reach out to a bunch of people that have figured out how to make, Teams work. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but these were obviously all valid concerns. And I just wanted to throw out in this part one, before we look at the collab features, a few thoughts, right? Like the too expensive piece, I think, that's depending, like there's a lot of ways to lower the cost, and not everybody, needs DIDs. So there are ways to use direct routing, which makes it substantially cheaper. And that's why probably, upwards of 70–80% of organizations are currently using direct routing. Inadequate features. This one's a tough one for me because, Microsoft has always been about the ecosystem. And I would say that, obviously Teams out of the box as a PBX doesn't do everything. It does a heck of a lot, maybe not everything, but I have a tough time figuring out, why you couldn't leverage parts of the ecosystem. You can almost do anything because there's so many companies that not only have been part of the ecosystem for a long time, but as the growth in Teams, continues to skyrocket, certainly you see many more vendors, both on the software and hardware side, rushing to get piece of that 270 million monthly active users. And then, obviously, if you have existing contracts, or if you're, kind of depreciation isn't, you're still depreciating a PBX, makes sense. With carrier contracts, most likely you can kind of, move that over. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. Now, as I mentioned, in past years, I've used a whole bunch of different themes, but for this year, my theme at Enterprise Connect was really around healing, and of course, dogs. And I talked a little bit about Teams, of course. So, it really felt to me that 2 years into this pandemic, we all could use a little bit of healing from the isolation. I've always worked from home, which has been great, but it wasn't, so I was still working from home, but then I was always at home, and it was those occasional conferences or lunch with colleagues or just going out to the grocery store, which really got, stripped back. And of course, there was the constant unknowns of COVID, and so many people and their loved ones suffered from that. My husky Kai was injured this fall, and he didn't complain about it, but really he was only able to walk on 3 legs. He had hurt his leg. Many Teams deployments are kind of limping along like that. And, certainly, Teams, like my husky Kai, doesn't complain if you don't use all the features. End users most often don't complain because they don't really know what they're missing. But not using all the power of Teams and having Teams limp along on its 3 legs is really silently reducing your organization's productivity. And as part of in this presentation, I just want to share some information and insights that really will help you and any organizations that you're working with gain more productivity from teams. Many organizations clearly rush to teams. I think, if you talk to organizations, for those that were in the Microsoft ecosystem and quickly rolled out or ramped up Teams, Teams really was one of the key pieces that provided the power that helped keep their businesses running, even with everyone working remotely. I think people need to go on mute.
Yeah,
A few people.
I couldn't find that person. Sorry.
No worries. I think the growth of Teams, and so like here's the chart. The last reported numbers, 270 million monthly active users. It demonstrates really how organizations relied on it, and Teams is a powerful UC breed, and I would argue, just like my husky. See, this is Steve why I use the dog analogies, right? Like, like huskies, man, they're great. They can withstand temperatures as low as -60 Fahrenheit. They use that super bushy tail to wrap around their face so that they breathe warm air, and their eyes are kind of almond shaped, because as opposed to the big puppy dog eyes, because that's designed to let them squint when there's all that snow and the brightness from the snow. So
Yeah, wow.
very, very cool. And just like that, Teams and more broadly UC is powerful. And I mean, that's not just an opinion. Blair Pleasant and I, for BC Strategies, late last year, so November 2021, we did a user adoption and training study, and that was sponsored by Vonage and Zoom and supported by Poly. Now, the respondents used a whole bunch of different UC platforms, but a majority of them, quite frankly, used Microsoft Teams. And I've got a few data points from that study, but this particular one, when we asked, did your new UC&C solution make you more productive and effective? Because I think it is all about business outcomes. 50% of the people said yes. So, UC in general and Teams specifically has the power to make you more productive. But, to unleash that power and the productivity, you need to both, tame teams and also, tend to teams. I wanted to start with a little bit of a story, and I told you Kai got injured. It was a morning in November, and I was walking Kai as normal, and we stopped at the corner. I live kind of near a conservation area, so there's a lot of animals. And then there was a fox that appeared, and that's not uncommon. They're very playful, and they like to run away from Kai and then run back, and I don't know, seem to try to engage. But for some reason, when the fox was like 30 feet away and Kai's still on a leash, he decided to just lunge towards the fox. And, he let out a loud yelp, clearly injuring his back leg. And he then wouldn't put any weight on it. I thought maybe I'd have to carry him home, and he's like 65 pounds, so that's not easy. But he was able to make, slowly walking back. And it turns out that he tore his ACL. And with dogs, because the ACL, as I understand, is under constant pressure because of the way their knee is, you have to do this extensive knee surgery called TPLO, and they reverse the knee joint and put in some plates. But it was, it's sad because it's sad. You have this powerful dog limping around. And I think that that's also when I work with large organizations, it's sad to see a powerful collaboration and communication tool in Teams hobbled because people don't know the commands to unlock the potential. Knowledge and effort are required to unleash the power and productivity, because it's similar to when you meet a new dog. You're not sure of what tricks it knows. There's a good chance that they know sit, stay, down. UC systems are a lot like that. They can pretty much all chat, call, and host a meeting. But it is hard to know the other tricks that a dog or a UC system can perform. So, for instance, my husky Kai knows things you might not know, like he can do high 5, high 10. He can say sing, and he howls like a wolf or a husky. And the same, this is my daughter's golden retriever. Her name is Promise. She knows different tricks, but that's Microsoft Teams. It has a collection of tricks or capabilities that Many don't realize, and it's different than, Zoom and WebEx. And most users and many of the IT professionals only know the basics: sit, stay down, chat, call, meet. And the problem, of course, is when you got IT pros or users that don't understand the full range of capabilities, or when the IT pros don't actively align and promote these capabilities to the business, you end up with this powerful, well-trained dog only doing basic tricks. You end up with a powerful communication and collaboration system not delivering the benefits that it could deliver. And so, this is just not my opinion either. So back to the species strategy study. When we asked the users, do you feel you have a good understanding of all the features and capabilities of your UC&C solution? Only a third of the people said yes. So this wasn't unique to Teams. The capabilities of most collaboration and communication systems, they've been increasing far faster, especially over the past 2 years, than users' comprehension or awareness of these capabilities. And here's the thing, even if you're in that 1/3, so that minority of people that said yes, given the pace of change, I would argue that very quickly, maybe, many of the yes votes changed to a no, because I say this because when you look at Teams, Teams continues to innovate and evolve. Some of this is due to competition from Zoom, which has been a powerful competitor, and to a lesser degree from Cisco WebEx. They haven't innovated perhaps quite as quickly, but this competition has been fantastic. I mean, this slide is from March, but basically Teams introduces on average, there's like 310 features over the past year. So they average approximately 25 to 30 new features every single month. And you look at this, Microsoft, they have a Microsoft 365 roadmap, so it's all the products, but this is just filtered for Teams. There's hundreds of features always in development, and then they slowly, roll out. So with all these features being introduced, which is fantastic, but already only a third of the people understand the features that are already there. And, I'm going to talk a little bit about the tricks you didn't know Teams could do, and the tricks that hopefully will increase productivity for you if you use Teams, but certainly for things to look for as you help organizations use Teams. So it's kind of like a new trick when I trained Husky to drive, my Husky Kai to drive. Now he didn't really drive down, but maybe he could have driven me down to Orlando. So I'm going to talk about, in part one, I'm going to talk about the built-in capabilities and the first-party extensions. So those are things that are part of the Microsoft Office bundle that, if you have an E-series license, you're already paying for, and maybe you're not using. And then in part two, I'll talk more about third-party extensions. So other people building apps like our Trivia Engine app and others, and then some of the Teams low code and no code capabilities to do business specific things. So let's get in and talk about the first part, which is built-in capabilities, because many of the capabilities of Teams remain unknown to both the users and to IT pros. So let's literally start talking about some of the Teams built-in commands. Sit, stay down, that's good for dogs. If you want to know the commands that Teams responds to, you can just type / in the search and command bar at the top of Teams. And a lot of people, I think it says search, but if you type, /, it'll give you a list of all of the commands there. And I've shown that it's listed. A couple of my favorites is you can type in /org and then a person's name, and it'll show you, who they report to and who reports to them, kind of in a nice chart there. A lot of people start by saying, can you hear me, and all this stuff. If you type in /test call, it uses the echo service. So you record a short message and then it plays it back. So this way, exactly how you're going to sound to the remote attendees. And that's obviously useful before an important call or a meeting where you'll be presenting, especially now as we're moving around, right? You might be in a hotel or at the cottage or at a Starbucks. So /test call gives you a great understanding of not how you're going to hear the other people, but how the other people are going to hear you.
Very comfortable. Yeah, I like them.
/go-to, like when you have a lot of teams and channels. So when when organizations use Teams for collaboration, they have a tendency, there's sometimes team and channel sprawl, but like /go-to, you can then type the name of a team or a channel. So, you can scroll down and look for it. It was funny, I was sharing this with the analyst relations people at Microsoft, the /go-to, because they have a lot of teams and a lot of channels. It's so funny. So here they people working at Microsoft, they didn't know this, and this just made their life a lot easier, almost on a daily basis, because they're constantly jumping back and forth. And then there's a bunch of commands that set your status. So before I went to present, I did /DND, which is do not disturb, so you don't get all these notifications. And then you can like change your other status and what have you, just using a / command. Of course, you can do it manually, but this is just a quick way to do it. So these are some of the things that are just built in. These are built-in commands for Teams. And I mentioned that, Teams is evolving quickly. I think, one of the things that we see is that people don't keep up with these, but they're like, well, how do I know about these things? Well, the amazing thing is if you click on help on the lower rail, so it's, always there, and then you select what's new, it gives you a list of what's new. And the great thing about it is, you can keep track of like what's new on the desktop version, or if you use Teams on, an iOS device or an Android's device. And then it also tells you what's new for Teams devices. So some of the meeting room stuff. So right there, you can track the capabilities, right from an end user. And I would suggest that, as an end user, once a week, go click on that, because there could be a feature that might actually be something that saves you a whole bunch of time. And this is all about leveraging the tools to improve your productivity, your business outcomes, make your life a little bit easier. And additionally, the admins, so IT pros, they have access to something called the Message Center in Office Admin. And as I mentioned, everyone has access to this Office 365 roadmap. And then everyone also has access to what's new in Teams. They have a tech community post where every month Microsoft, and then a bunch of people, including myself, if there's interesting things, I might write an article, but Microsoft posts this, pretty much on a monthly basis to their tech community post. So lots of ways to keep up with, kind of the new commands that the Teams is busy learning. And if we talk about just like some of the latest roundups of new, capabilities, some of these are minor. So for example, if you've got very verbose people or chatty people in the chat, you can now change the chat density. What that means is you just see more messages on the screen. There's the time zone on a contact card, which is kind of cool when you're collaborating with people. I do a bunch of work with people in Europe and then people on the West Coast, and sometimes I get the math wrong, and I add 5 hours instead of subtracting. So it shows you for the different people what time it is where they're located. You can see some initial, Microsoft starting to integrate some of the LinkedIn information. So you can see some LinkedIn information available during chats. Right now, it's really only on one-to-one chats, but that's really foreshadowing that you'll be able to see LinkedIn information for all the participants in a meeting. Might be interesting, especially as you're meeting with people, whether it's inside your organization or externally that you haven't met with before. There's more video options, including being able to disable seeing yourself. I mean, I think here's examples where like Zoom comes out with some features and then, Microsoft is a fast follower or vice versa. You can mirror your video. I guess that's like if you wear, if it's t-shirts with sayings, then the sayings are the right way. And then, just recently you can apply video filters, which like if you got a really bright window behind you, Teams does a pretty decent job of, kind of fixing that for you. And then you can also, I guess, I don't know if there's wrinkles, there's some smoothing of your face as well. And they're starting to, of course, Microsoft, the bundle proposition, they're starting to integrate on, especially Windows 11, some things with Teams. And so, for instance, when you're in Teams, and it can extend to other UC platforms, but I so far I think it only works with Teams. You have like the mute button right in the taskbar. So if you got multiple windows, you don't have to go try to figure out where the mute is. It's right kind of part of the Windows 11 taskbar. And also, and I really like this, if you got a lot of windows open, you can say share and then kind of scroll through the list of windows. But in Windows 11, like once you run Teams, each of the icons on the taskbar, you can just go and click on it and pick share. So if you want to share whatever Excel spreadsheet, you can very easily find the right one. And then you can cast from Windows directly to a Teams meeting room, so no cables. So like I've got a USB-C, or if some people have HDMI, you don't have to have that spaghetti of cables. You can just cast directly. And then like in Zoom, where you could spacebar to mute and unmute. On Windows, it's not spacebar, it's control space and option space. So to temporarily unmute when you're muting. So a bunch of new capabilities, and these kind of keep coming, month after month. And these are some keyboard shortcuts. So if you type in, /keys, that's, it basically shows you a bunch of additional key things. So I mentioned that control space and option space, but there's a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts that make things easy. It's multiple pages. So, but the key thing is go to the command bar, type /keys, and you get this whole list of whatever they are. There's a whole bunch of capabilities like we talked about. So once again, Teams as a collaboration platform, I think it's interesting because Zoom is about simplicity and Microsoft is about, I don't know, give you probably 3 different ways to do the same thing. I'm not sure what is better, but one of the things that's clear is there's a whole bunch of messaging capabilities that have been around for a long time. And, people still haven't really figured out all of these. So for example, at mentioning people so that they get notification. Otherwise, whatever you post, if whatever wonderful post you write, people aren't going to notice that. And you can, of course, at mention the entire channel or at mention a team, and then everybody gets notified. And if you, while you're composing a message, like I'm a big, like I get into new cars and push every button. My wife hates that, especially she got a new car and she's like, don't mess with it. But that's how I'm not afraid to kind of explore. So, if in a Teams message for number 1 there, you click on that A with a pen icon, then you get even more options. Microsoft believes in more is more. So they just give you a million options. And number 2 shows you that once you then do that, you can do a bunch of things in the collaboration. So you can, for example, create an announcement from the first dropdown, and then that gets displayed prominently. You can control who can respond. So maybe you want to post something, but you don't want people to reply to it. You can post the same message across. If you've got a million teams and channels and you think your messages are really important, you can post them across a whole bunch of different channels. And then beside number 3 there, you've got, I don't know, like a zillion message options. I just encourage you to experiment. I'll talk about a couple of them, but there's a whole bunch of them, including like you can send a Starbucks gift card to somebody as part of, just to say thank you. So lots and lots of options. These aren't new, but I think they're new to most. And if you're going to use Teams as a collaboration tool effectively, certainly explore and be aware of those particular options. In the interaction between Outlook and Teams, that's not new, but it's recently improved. So, people talk about, and I'm not fully convinced that this always works out, but they talk about, reducing email by using chat. I'm not sure that you're reducing the communication overload by moving it from one place to another, but you can send any message in Teams now to Outlook by clicking on the 3 dots, and that are and then it basically gives you this pop-up here, and then you can say shared Outlook. So if you have people like some people are using Teams, but some are still in Outlook, or you can send it externally. And then in the other direction, you can, from Outlook, if you're trying to move into Teams, you can open any email message and click on the relatively new Share to Teams button in the ribbon bar, and you will be able to then share that to Microsoft Teams, and it lets you pick either a person or a group or a channel to send that email message to. And this is especially useful if your organization has decided to try to move more of your communication and collaboration out of email and into Microsoft Teams. Okay. Other things, and I think in a fireside chat a while ago, this isn't brand new, but this keeps advancing over time, is the analytics. And, for example, in any channel, you can click on the 3 dots and you can choose to manage the channel and then click on the analytics tab. And really, the idea is this is showing the level of engagement. And so in this example, we've got good engagement, because we've got multiple people posting and replying. If you only ever, have a channel where maybe you're the only poster, or there's just one poster and there's no replies, maybe that channel has outlived its usefulness, or maybe, Teams collaboration is about kind of that engagement piece. So the analytics, I'm a big fan of analytics as the compass to figure out what direction, and if you're moving in the right direction, and then also as a yardstick to figure out if things are working how you want. If you're not getting engagement inside your channel or Teams, maybe there's more training that's required. I did a whole session at Enterprise Connect on analytics. Microsoft is clearly, leaning into hybrid work specifically, and they're introducing a bunch of reports, but also a bunch of features in Teams. Leading into the pandemic, there was like 25 research projects that Microsoft was doing in different geographies, some by Microsoft Research Group, some just by different countries. And they brought all those together. And if you haven't looked at it, and they publish and kind of promote it a lot, but every year, well, the 2021 and 22, they publish this work trend index where they do a poll like the quick poll Steve did, but it's like 20,000 people across 20 different countries. And they really get a good pulse of what people are feeling in terms of where they want to work, and just a whole bunch of different things. And they break it down by country, because there's a lot of interesting different cultural norms. So if you haven't looked at that, take a look at that. They also have a Work Lab site, and there's the URL there, where they have a whole bunch of just blogs from different sources just on supporting hybrid work. And then they've updated their products. So a couple examples are Outlook RSVP. Now you can, say you're going to attend a meeting, but like 28% of people working remotely say that one of the toughest things is they don't know when they should head into the office. And this Outlook RSVP, it lets people know, yes, I'll attend the meeting, and am I going to attend remotely, or am I going to attend in the office, so that you can kind of not show up at an office to find you're the only person sitting there because everybody else attended remotely. So that's a neat feature. And then they're doing some Teams meeting room updates, this front row thing, which is all around kind of trying to create meeting equity so that people both remotely and in the room have a similar experience. And I will talk about in part 2 this, Operator Connect and Operator Connect Mobile and Operator Connect Accelerator, which are ways to PSTN enable and as well bring in the mobile phone as well. It was interesting because I think this was just how they spun it, because I think Nicole had a conflict, but she presented remotely at Enterprise Connect, and Mahendra was in person on the stage, so they called it a hybrid keynote, which once again, I think that was just good spin.
Mm-hmm.
So just the second part I just want to talk about is these first party extensions. So these are things like Teams has lots of built-in capabilities, but it doesn't stop there. Microsoft said Teams is the hub where work gets done. And that kind of makes sense, because Teams, really, it's the glue. For Office 365, Teams exposes a whole bunch of features. So in that Microsoft 365 a bundle. So I like to think of Teams as being part of the pack. So you got the Husky pack. Here's a whole bunch of apps. So this is when I go into my Office 365, I see all of these apps, and there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, most people don't even know what a whole bunch of these apps do, but I just briefly want to just draw your attention to 3 of the first party apps that can boost productivity in many companies if they're not using them: Forms, Planner, and Lists. So Forms is really can create moderately complex surveys, quizzes, or polls. So sometimes organizations go out and buy another product, let's say SurveyMonkey, but if you've got an Office license, you have Microsoft Forms. It, like all the pieces, keeps getting better. So if you looked at it a year ago or 2 years ago, it was very basic, but now it actually allows you to do a bunch of things. You can do a quick poll in a channel by clicking on one of those magical buttons, a million icons in the message. And then that lets you just send a quick poll to your channel and see the results. And that's pretty cool. You can also, let's see, what am I showing here? Okay, so that's you can do it in, this is just walking through how that works. You can't get the individual results to see who said what, so it's all anonymous, but you can see the overall. You can also, in the middle of a meeting, like what Steve did, you can create a form in a meeting, and you can create it ahead of time in the meeting so people can respond ahead of time with the meeting thing, or you can launch it directly in the meeting. So you open the Teams calendar and you click this plus sign, and then it brings up, lets you build this form, and you can create polling questions from scratch, or they have some handy suggestions of polling questions you might want to ask. And then in the meeting, you can launch them if you're the presenter, and then it gives people time to respond, and it can be anonymous, or, how was your feeling today? And here's the results. And then the other thing you can use is Forms to do surveys as a tab in an ongoing, and this can be more complicated, multi-question. You could put that in a particular channel. Maybe it's in your team and you just want to get some detailed feedback. And then the detailed results are also available on a channel tab, so everybody can see, and it does some fancy graphs and what have you. So, Forms is something your organization's already paying for and often not using. The second thing I want to touch on briefly is something that, well, I'm going to call it Planner, but what Microsoft calls it now is Tasks by Planner and To Do. I think nobody ever accused Microsoft of having good naming conventions, but they have, like, I don't know, 5 different ways to keep track of tasks. But in Planner, you can set that up, and it really is quite powerful in terms of just tracking tasks and assigning, and it sends you notifications, and you can have different views of the tasks and some graphs and whatever. So it's not as extensive, of course, as Microsoft Project, but I would contend that most people don't use Microsoft Project properly anyway. So Tasks by Planner and To Do, which you can use directly inside of Teams, is great for keeping a whole group of people on this, doing what they're supposed to do, and then whoever's leading that project can see what's on track, and then you can even chat about the any particular task. You can have a chat about a particular item for clarity or whatever, using the collab features of Microsoft Teams. So you can have a calendar view. And then the last kind of first party app that I just want to talk about is called Lists. So you can to add it to a team, a channel, you click on the plus sign as usual to add it. And really, lists becomes a better way. A lot of people keep track of things, lists, in Excel spreadsheets that maybe they post to the files section of Teams. But this really is great because you can create a list from scratch, and you can specify all the columns, similar to if people are familiar with the SharePoint list. But then there's a whole bunch of templates, and some of them are shown here. So for instance, like keeping track of like, you know, issues lists, like when we were building the Trivia Engine app, we would use an issues list, the template here, and it was fantastic. And then, you know, similar to with the tasks, you can use the power of Teams, so you can have a separate Teams chat to discuss each issue. So it's kind of like lists embedded into Teams, and then Teams chat embedded into lists. So another, you know, excellent first party app that allows you to, you know, track things much better than just Excel spreadsheets.
So Kevin,
Should
yeah, we pause? Would this be a good moment to pause for the week?
Yeah, I've just got like 1 minute.
Go ahead, sure.
So I just wanted to mention, and I'm not going to go through this, Teams has a bunch of frontline capabilities, so check those out. Teams has a bunch of educational capabilities and really with that, you know, the summary for part 1 is Teams is much more than PSTN calling. I barely talked about that. Most organizations, I would suggest almost all, are not leveraging the full capabilities of Teams. And, you know, Microsoft is absolutely adding a whole bunch of new features, so keep up to date, focusing on hybrid work. And I would argue you can, you know, win by doing kind of the same in terms of focusing on that and assisting organizations. So a few kind of call to actions. If you are running Teams, take a look at what's new. Certainly, if you're interested, install Trivia Engine from the Teams App Store. It's free and it's fun. And then, you know, if you need, you know, between part 1 and part 2, if you're either selling against Teams or you're trying to win Teams deals, I'm more than happy to assist in that regard. So reach out to me, and then certainly, as Steve knows and others, if you've got Teams projects and need some expertise in delivering certain pieces, certainly Enable UC can help. So with that, I used up all my time, and thank you.
Well, and thanks, Kai, for being on the last slide there.
There you go. Yeah, I've got one dog lying under my, I actually have Promise lying under my desk, but Kai, I don't know, he's not in the room right now, but there you go.
Okay. And any quick questions for Kevin? I know we're at the top of the hour here. Okay. I think you filled our plate to way more than we thought, Kevin.
That's why we broke it. That's why we broke it into 2 pieces, right?
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. We will see you next week. And thanks again, Kevin, for hosting today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.